from my usual videos that I've been coming out with, but it's always something that's intrigued me. Mass Effect as a whole, the series has been, and actually is, my favorite video game series of all time. And it's quite strange because normally I've always been a medieval fantasy type of player. I've always enjoyed those type of RPGs such as The Elder Scrolls, and then eventually Dragon Age, Divinity, Original Sin. Dragon's Dogma, Dark Souls, you name it. If it has something to do with beating guys up with giant weapons, I'm a game for it. But something stole my heart not too many years ago, around 2012, and that was the Mass Effect series. I never was originally very interested in the science fiction, but there's just something about the atmosphere, the characters, just the way that the world is built, the lore, everything about what BioWare has made in this trilogy is just something special. And it's always intrigued me to delve deeper into these games to see what lies under the hood. And one of the main things that comes to mind, of course, is Mass Effect's ending. It's, of course, been over 5 years, 6 years since the release of Mass Effect 3, and unfortunately many fans found themselves disappointed by the ending, and their trust for BioWare has never been the same since. And this is very late coming, and has likely been done in different formats beforehand, but truth be told, in my own words, I would like to express this sentiment. Was the ending really what it was? I mean, really. I mean, we have the indoctrination theory to explain away basically what it was that happened. And the indoctrination theory is very interesting, I would say. Before the extended cut DLC was released to the public, I would say that the indoctrination theory in its entirety was very sound. But after the extended cut DLC, especially after that and the Leviathan DLC, many people come to the conclusion that the indoctrination theory is that the ending was what it was and it was trash, basically. But I would like to ask that question again. Was it really what we think it was? A brief summarization of the indoctrination theory would simply be that in the last stage of the game, when Commander Shepard and his team and Hammer Squad Brigade are charging down the hill towards the transportation device that leads to the Citadel, Harbinger arrives and he starts decimating the crew. People start dying left and right. And once Commander Shepard is what appears to be hit, quote unquote, by Harbinger's beam, it's stated that from that point onward, the ending in and of itself is in fact a hallucination. Now, I'm not currently here to discredit whether it was a hallucination or not, because there are some bits of evidence that could be used to state that it is. However, there's something else that should be understood here about what BioWare created in their narrative and the force that is the Reapers themselves. I would state that the ending was most likely not a hallucination. It was actually really happening. especially after the extended cut was released. However, there is one theme prevalent throughout the Mass Effect games, especially throughout 2 and 3, that should not be ignored. And that is the simple fact that the Reapers have had their influence and their contact with Shepard. And I honestly would state that the ending is most likely Commander Shepard undergoing the events literally as they are being shown. However, that does not dismiss the fact that the enemy is not trying to beguile Shepard or trick them, in layman's terms, into giving into indoctrination. But where's my evidence for this, you might state? Well, there's a plethora of evidence that could be presented to give my case a lot more validity than I can do so right now. However, that's something that I would like to actually do in a coming series that I would like to work on, in which I will delve into and investigate certain aspects through the story and investigate details that are given through certain aspects, statements, quotes, presentations via the codex, etc., that lend credence to this indoctrination attempt on Shepard. Like I said, there's a lot of evidence and a lot of breakdown that I would have to go through in order to make it. So the best that I can do now is summarize what my future claims would be, and it's a simple fact that Shepard's exposure to not 1, 2, or 3, or even 4, but a heavily, that's not even the proper term, forgive me, just heavy exposure to stimuli that would kickstart any type of brainwashing process that would rewrite Shepard's mind and force them to come to different conclusions. There's a lot of different things. I can give a brief scenario here. From as early as watching Sovereign take off of Eden Prime in the very first mission of Mass Effect 1, the mind-splitting ultrasonic noise that it makes doing so, exposure to artifacts that the Reapers apparently have created throughout the galaxy, exposure to derelict Reapers in which every person on the station or the derelict Reaper was indoctrinated, exposure to Reapers themselves, Reaper troops, and the list goes on and on and on and on. And it's actually something that people should be asking. Is it true? What is it that would make it not true? Would it be a plot hole if, in fact, Shepard just seemed to be a superhero somehow, and while others around him or her have given into indoctrination and succumb to it, they just never have any effects whatsoever? And that's where this series would come in. And I will once again, like many have done, but with my own twist, investigate exactly what it is that's possibly going on here in Shepard's mind and in the story in general. Now, I've had discussions with individuals before that were against us, that stated that it was purely that the claims that were made for the theory were not based in reality, but the evidence should be analyzed in a very objective, as much as of an objective manner as possible in order to come to the proper conclusions, I would state. Because there is something going on. While I will definitely admit there is, out of my research into this theory, I have come across quite a numerous amount of bad quote-unquote evidence that could be considered grasping at straws, or just wishful thinking, far-fetched ideas, or just basically expanding a very small, isolated incident into enormity, shall we say. So there are a lot of instances where people would say these things, and my only concern is that if that was really the case, why would so many people honestly be skeptical about it? Well, I would say there are even more people that believe that the ending was just literal and was not very good. There are a lot of people that are skeptical. There is a lot of attention to specific details that were given. If people will actually investigate into it and look at it without a preconceived notion. Now, it could easily be stated that indoctrination theorists should abide by the same rules. If people were to assume, of course, that people that believe the theory is credible, that they're actually being biased and they're using preconceptions to determine whether this is actually true or not. But that's not necessarily the case. Now, I have seen claims and watched the work of many people investigating into this, whether they be for it or trying to disprove it. And the fact is that there are actually two sides, and they both give very strong evidence for and against. But the truth of the matter is that evidence can be worked in such a fashion that it can make something seem true. I've seen some examples of evidence that definitely seemed true, discredited by lesser videos that might not have been seen by other people, with very strong evidence to do so. Now, in this series that I plan on releasing, I think that it would be several principles and guidelines will be very necessary to try to make sure that we actually can come to a correct conclusion onto whether this ending is true or not, or whether the ending is actually something else entirely that went over everyone's heads. And that's the simple fact that we will have to understand the context of the given situations in the story and the details that are portrayed to us when it comes to the involvement of those who might be under the influence of indoctrination, or of the indoctrination influence itself, if it exists in the mind of Shepard, and how that is presented to the player and in what ways it is done. Now, another thing that we have to do is use evidence that actually boasts a considerable amount of backing from the game itself. Now, there's, like, as I stated earlier, there's a lot of evidence that can be considered simply grasping at straws. I've seen certain things. Examples include Shepard's gun changing, Major Coates appearing on the Citadel towards the end if you use a fly cam, Major Coates disappearing and reappearing, etc., etc., etc. Even something like such as the blurred background or the trees that you see when after Shepard is hit, quote unquote, hit by Harbinger's beam and gets back up. And I would say that while some of these things are definitely interesting as to what's going on their own, they are not strong enough evidence to support any structure to this theory whatsoever. And it's this type of evidence that will make me understand why there are skeptics out there that state that the claims of indoctrination theorists are actually not based upon reality. However, there is good evidence that I would like to go over in my future series. And just as I gave examples of some of the bad evidence, some good examples of evidence for the indoctrination theory are the star child, as they call him, the catalyst. What is the deal with him and having a similar appearance to the kid on Earth? What is the deal with the choices that Shepard has to make? Some of the words that Harbinger himself has stated to Shepard: "Your mind will be mine," quote unquote, end of quote, etc., etc. There's a lot of stuff. There is also evidence that those who are against the theory, they have very good evidence against it as well, but this is usually visual evidence and not so much, direct audio feedback. But I can come up with some evidence against it myself to dispute some of the claims that people make, such as, how exactly is it a dream? What does the blurred background after Shepard gets up from being struck by the laser have to do with anything? How does that actually show that it is a hallucination or a dream that Shepard is undergoing? How do you explain the elusive man and David Anderson actually being representations of Shepard's mind, etc.? There's a lot that can be gone over, and I will do so in the future series, but I wanted to have this discussion over this in order to sort of jumpstart what is to come, in order to basically get the momentum going in this idea. Now, there's a lot of old evidence that others have come across that I have seen, and there's also some things that I've come across that others have not noticed in any videos that I have seen. And some of this stuff is pretty interesting. That should actually be food for thought as to whether the ending was what we thought it was. What were we perceiving during this ending? But all of that will come in the near future, I assure you. I'll get around to it. And hopefully, if there are any viewers that like to come by and watch these videos, perhaps you'll be able to actually enjoy the series, and perhaps see something that you didn't see before, or perhaps you guys could introduce your own ideas that you've come across that could be the ending of Mass Effect, or just the indoctrination theory in general. I'm open to discussion about these things, even if it's not necessarily about this theory. Maybe it's something else about Mass Effect in general. Any passerby, be willing to, well, if you're willing to, please leave a comment and describe what your thoughts are when it comes to this topic in general, or in other topics with Mass Effect. And I'll be happy to have a discussion with anyone that would like to have a discussion over this stuff. But I find it intriguing, and I'm definitely going to continue to investigate into it further and work on this coming series. And hopefully what I'll be able to do is finally come up with a conclusive set of unbiased, strongly supported evidence that is near irrefutable, that can help us to come to the decision on what it is that exactly is going on in this ending. So with that said, hopefully I'll see you guys there when the series comes out. But with that, that's going to be it. Sage Armageddon out.